Hello Poniesnet, I'm Candace Rose and welcome to my first tutorial. I just wanted to do a quick basic run through of how I personally draw ponies. And usually when I start drawing ponies, I first off have a rough sketch that I work from, and I also always start with a reference which can be seen right there. So once I have my reference and my general character design either planned out, either on paper or in my head, I always start off with a series of 3 circles, all about the same size, just to block out where the body's going to be. There we go. You can tell I'm recording this while trying to watch the footage. And so I start with these 3 main circles, and I usually either move them around or alter their sizes later on my drawings, but to start off with, they are usually all the same size. And at least with this drawing, I believe they stay the same size, even though I didn't really adhere to the guidelines all that well. So we start off with the face, and I use the guidelines of centering off the face, and the horizontal line I usually use to follow where the bottom of the eyes are going to be. Now with my drawings, in some other drawings I've seen, the circle for the head is usually, that is the head, if not most of the lower jaw, but I actually add on a lower jaw, kind of like how a human skull is based off of. So I build the jaw off of the skull and end up creating the muzzle as well as the cheeks. Kind of like that. Apparently not. I was having some trouble today, I don't know why. Okay. Depending on the angle, I either have to draw the squared off muzzle and then actually build up the jawline and the cheekbones. For the ears, I usually go from where the jawbone connects to the skull and end up drawing a base circle, which is the main part of the ear that is connected. And then I build up off of a triangle for that, and then figure out where the second ear is going to be by drawing a line over and basing it off of that. For when I draw unicorns, even though this character right here is not technically a unicorn, how I draw the horn is I usually draw a circle and then another smaller circle and connect the two. But that would be in another drawing. Cleanup for the guidelines, and we still have the guideline for the base of the eyes. So I draw the eyes like they're actually the sockets in the skull, because it helps me get a better understanding of how the eyes are fitting into it. And then I go about and drawing the eyelid, because how an eyeball is set up is a circle, and then the eyelid actually creates the shape of it. Kind of like that, you draw the upper eyelid or lower eyelid, and then you get this crease, which I sometimes use as the eyebrow, sometimes I add in an eyebrow on top of that. It just depends on how I want to draw the expressions for the character. I was playing around with actually adding on eyebrows for here, and this is a technique I've learned from I think it was a Tony Bancroft book, I might be wrong, but basically it's just to figure out where the eyebrows should properly go. Okay, moving on to the actual construction of the body. I usually use a similar technique of centering off and quartering the chest area of my characters to actually get a good understanding of where their shoulders and as well as their hips go. So figuring out where the legs would connect on the body, because I actually draw in shoulders instead of them just coming off the side. Figuring out where the spine would go, as well as there's the hips. And then just blocking out how I want the legs to look. Need to remember where the joints and the bones are in the leg, where they should bend and all that. After I get the legs roughly sketched out, I usually end up going back and resketching over, getting the details better finalize the expression out here. And at this point I was like, nope, no eyebrows for him. And even if you block out some things, you sometimes can realize later on that this section's a bit too long, and then you can just move things around. This is why I always work on multiple layers for each stage, and then I just turn them off later. His neck was a little long, so I'm just going to move it up just a smidge. And I'm just going to go back and move my guide layers up so everything's matchy-matchy. I wasn't liking how that leg was going, so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with it. And this is where you need to keep in mind, again, the joints, how the leg's supposed to bend, the bone structure of the character, and anatomy. Anatomy is your friend, guys, even for cartoons. When I first started drawing ponies, I hated drawing the back legs, but now I actually really like it. I guess I just figured out the shapes that I like the best. this character is actually a Pegasus, so I am having to now move the shoulder up a little bit so the wings are not too far down his back. So I can start with the joints where they connect to the spine, draw the main bone that's arching up, and then the general shape of how I want the first primary feather to arch, as well as on the other side. As at this point I realized I did the canvas wrong, so let's flip things around. There we go. And redo that so it's a little bit better arch. Now to get the basic, nope, I'm still not happy with that. Yeah, this seems a little better. Okay, now to get the basic shape of the wing down, we do a couple little arches, and then the general guidelines for the primary feathers, and then sketching them out real quick. And then some of the secondary feathers, which are made of just what I call the puff floof, and then I guess those are the tertiary feathers. I don't know the exact terminology. I need to get an actual diagram of a wings. But yeah, there we go. Now here's the fun part of actually drawing out the mane and the tail, which is usually my favorite part because I love drawing hair. I love drawing it foofy, I love drawing it all the curls. I don't know why, but I always do those little curlicues on top of my characters' heads for some reason. Looking back on this character, it's kind of, I didn't realize exactly how long I made his mane, so I ended up shortening it just a bit. And then his floofy tail. Oh, the floof. When I'm doing the sketching, I mostly draw everything out. I don't usually hide things until I actually get to the line art phase, mainly so that when I do see it, I know it's in the proper place. And now we're just going to line it, so I'll be right back. There we go. Now just doing some basic cleanup around for the line art before we move on to the next phase, where I am just going to quickly make his cutie mark. I've realized like the more I draw ponies, the more I actually forget cutie marks in a lot of images. I find that kind of hilarious. And I apologize if I ever done commissions for people and I just left your cutie mark out entirely. Just hit me up and I'll fix that, because I have done that actually several times and I'm just like horrified every time that happens. Sometimes I sneak back in and fix it, but sometimes I just like completely and utterly forget. Oh gosh. But this is one of the few key marks I've designed that I actually really like. And it's like the most contrived thing ever. But yeah. I ended up using a lot of shapes tools with this one. It's helpful when you want something a specific way, and it just makes it nice and clean. And just getting the right shade of color for the moon. And there's his cutie mark. I've started recently doing the base colors with the pen tool. I find it's a lot quicker than trying to go in with the brush, especially if I'm wanting to stay within the lines. And it also helps with making sure that you don't have empty pixels, especially when I export most of my things out as PNGs with transparent backgrounds. And no matter how hard I try with the paintbrush, I always end up with these sections where there is no color and there's just a transparent to the back, and it looks really ugly when you turn off the gray background that I used. And I usually end up putting just a solid black behind it, so I started using this and it's working out pretty well. And again, it's a lot faster. And you're not having to go back and forth between brush and eraser trying to make sure everything's all straight and nice. And I don't like using the paint bucket tool, mainly because sometimes I don't get the lines all the way closed, and going in and closing the lines can actually mess up the line art for me. And then it's this little tiny ring sometimes that's left over even if you use the paint bucket tool. So pen tool and then selection and then just fill it. That works so well. And then I use clipping mask for the rest of the color off of the base color, which is a lifesaver. And then I just block it out and then go back in with the pen tool to actually get things proper. And seeing that this character is so dark in color, I actually inverted the line art so I can see it better, and the keyboard shortcut is Control-I. For those who want to know, it is very helpful keyboard shortcuts, gotta love them. So basically I'm blocking out the sections that don't need to be the color of the main and masking those out. To go with the paintbrush for these smaller details. And his eyes. He's kind of a weird pony breed, so his eyes are actually black instead of white. Slap his cutie mark on. Warp it a little bit so it actually looks like it's curving around muscle instead of just a flat image pasted. And now comes the fun part, light and shadow. So basically when I do light, I do this kind of guide light thing with a gradient to show where the light's coming from. And then I draw in the lights, nice and pretty. Well, this is kind of sketched in, but yeah. I usually, depending on the color scheme and how intense I want the light, I usually put the layer mode either into screen or overlay and then bring down the opacity to 50% if not lower. This time I did to screen, and then I go into the shadow portion. I usually make my shadows either a blue or purplish color normally, but again, depending on the color scheme, it goes wonky sometimes. And I usually, because of his color scheme being so dark, I kept it the blue color for the entire time before I actually put it onto multiply, and multiply makes it look actually like shadows for me. I always seem to have the hardest time properly shading wings. Probably why I don't draw many of them actually in flight. But I'm going to push myself today and do something that I don't normally do. In all honesty, I hide a lot of things in my drawings. Like, mostly if you see a pony sitting, I have their tail curled around them, so again, I don't have to draw the cutie mark or put it in, because again, I normally forget. A bit, and then just like put a little bit of life into his eyes because they're so dark, and because he's so dark himself, it's hard to see them really. And then I usually end up erasing the line art around the irises just so they're not so segmented and they feel more like a uniform thing. Forgot to put the shadows on the teeth. Oopsie. And then with my light layer, I slightly blur it just to give it a little bit more, and then let's just add a little bit more dynamic lighting because he has enough shadow. And let's put it overlay, and yeah. Now just messing around with the colors a little bit, make sure they're nice and good, and yeah. That's how I draw ponies. So thank you all for watching, and until next time guys, if you have any ideas for any more tutorials you'd like me to do, please leave a link for it down in the description below. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram for posts of updates of things I'm working on, sneak peeks, works in progress, all that good stuff. If you like what I do and want to help support me, I have a link to my Patreon down below as well. And until next time guys, thank y'all for joining me, and have a good day.